You know, for years, the entire story of autonomous vehicles has been totally dominated by North America and Asia. But right now, we are seeing a monumental tectonic shift unfold. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking Europe's massive leap into the future of autonomous transit. We'll be looking at everything from multi-billion-dollar investments to the literal rewriting of continental laws.
Okay, let's dive right into this massive disparity. Get this, according to the International Energy Agency, back in 2025, the US and China were experiencing an absolute boom. We're talking over 8,000 active robotaxis heavily navigating through dozens of major cities. And Europe's market at that exact same time? Literally zero. Even by their own admission, European markets were running about 7 years behind schedule. It's a staggering contrast, right? But it perfectly sets the stage for the massive catch-up operation that's underway right now.
Section 1. The AI infrastructure shift.
So to really understand why Europe is suddenly slamming on the accelerator now, we got to look at the broader macro environment. AI and advanced computing are pivoting hard. They're moving away from software experiments and toward massive physical infrastructure. And the numbers here are just mind-blowing. You've got Anthropic filing for an IPO at a $965 billion valuation, OpenAI actually shutting down its viral Sora video app just to prioritize enterprise, IBM committing $10 billion to develop quantum Starling by 2029. We are seeing absolutely unprecedented capital mobilization. As one executive put it when talking about OpenAI's recent moves, tech giants simply can't afford to be distracted by side quests anymore. They're streamlining operations to focus entirely on the physical manifestations of AI. The days of just generating text on a screen, they're evolving. The real focus now is on deploying localized, embodied AI out into the real world. And robotaxis? Well, they're pretty much the ultimate heavy infrastructure example of this physical future.
Which brings us to Section 2. Europe steps on the gas.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating is how the European Union is finally reacting to being left in the dust in this physical AI race. The frustration actually reached the highest levels of government. Clement Beaune, the French Planning High Commissioner, straight up criticized the EU for lagging behind. See, for years, Europe's notoriously strict safety regulations, the ones mandating a safety driver must be on board with their hands on their lap at all times, well, you combine that with a deeply ingrained public transit culture, and it essentially put the brakes on any meaningful autonomous development. But guys, that narrative is changing fast. And this right here brilliantly illustrates Europe's solution to all that bureaucratic gridlock. The EU is adopting a new framework known as a testbed. So instead of forcing a tech company to get distinct approvals in France and then start all over in Germany and then Spain, this simplified approach lets them bypass all that country-by-country red tape. It completely clears the administrative roadblocks and effectively opens up the entire continent to rapid, scalable commercial trials. Moving on to Section 3, Zagreb, the first fleet.
And that brings us from the sweeping regulations of the EU right down to the micro level. Definitely mark this date on your calendars, April 8th, 2026. After years of falling behind the US and China, Europe officially entered the chat. A groundbreaking commercial robotaxi service officially launched to the public right on the streets of the Croatian capital. But here's the kicker, they didn't do it alone. It was an absolute masterclass in strategic partnerships.
Let's break this down, because this isn't some solo mission. It's a brilliant collaborative fleet architecture. Basically, they split the risk three ways. For the autonomous intelligence part, Chinese developer Pony.ai is supplying their advanced Gen 7 self-driving tech. Then, for fleet operations, a local startup named Verne actually owns and manages the physical assets. And finally, for demand orchestration, global giant Uber is integrating the service directly into their massive pre-existing ride-hailing network. It is just a perfect division of labor. Now, this initial rollout is highly intentional. They're operating in a 90 square kilometer zone right in central Zagreb, running from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and they're strategically targeting high-value routes, like the airport. Also, just to satisfy those strict Phase 1 regulations we talked about earlier, human safety operators are still seated behind the wheel, for now at least, even though the tech is fully capable of going totally driverless.
All right, Section 4, Scaling across the continent.
Because let's be real, Zagreb was just the spark. The invasion of autonomous tech across major European hubs is seriously accelerating this year. Over in London, heavyweights like Google's Waymo and Baidu's Apollo Go are navigating some really strict safety verifications. Meanwhile, Madrid is seeing WeRide partner up with Uber. Munich has Momenta complying with German standards, and honestly, this is the craziest one to me. In Switzerland, Apollo Go is actually partnering with Swiss Post for suburban and rural logistics.
They are out there testing literally every imaginable use case simultaneously.
And the scaling targets here are incredibly aggressive. Leveraging all this momentum in Europe and the Middle East, Pony.ai alone is targeting 3,000 active global fleet units by the end of 2026. To put that into perspective, when you realize that just a year prior, the entire global market was sitting around 8,000 vehicles total, a single company aiming for 3,000 shows you exactly how fast this snowball is rolling down the hill.
Section 5. The multi-billion-dollar future.
Now, let's zoom back out from the city streets for a second to look at the macroeconomic forecasts driving all this frantic deployment. The financial stakes here are absolutely astronomical. By the year 2035, the Boston Consulting Group is forecasting a massive 3 million robotaxis on the road globally. Unsurprisingly, China is expected to lead the pack with 850,000 vehicles, closely followed by the US with 350,000. But Europe is finally on the board. With a projected 120,000 vehicles, Europe is moving from zero to a major global player in just a decade.
And some analysts, they're betting even bigger. Goldman Sachs projects a global market of 6 million vehicles, valuing this entire sector at an astonishing $415 billion. That is exactly why the tech giants are dropping those software side quests we mentioned. The financial upside of physically moving humans and goods autonomously is simply way too large to ignore.
So, what's your key takeaway here? Well, the technology is no longer theoretical, and the European regulatory gates are officially wide open. But it does bring up a really fascinating friction point. Will billions in tech investments seamlessly integrate into daily life? Or will Europe's deeply ingrained commuter culture, people who genuinely love their reliable trains and subways, will they reject the robotaxi revolution? It's a massive behavioral clash playing out on the streets right now. So think about it. Are you ready to hand over the wheel? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.